Hey, what's up, everyone? Ralph here. So, in this video, I want to talk about why the left hates masculinity so much, right? Like, why does it seem like the left is waging a war on masculinity, right? Because have you noticed, right? The moment a man shows any type of confidence, leadership qualities, strength, is called toxic, right? Now, why would masculinity be treated like this, right? Like it's some type of threat, right? Because when you think about it, we all know that it's not accidental. Like there's a coordinated effort to make sure that anything masculine is seen as a threat to society, okay? And in this video, I want to talk about like some of the things that a lot of people are doing, like things in the media, like the elites, people in government. And why many people on the left are making it seem like being masculine is a toxic trait. Because when you break it all down, like this war on masculinity, right? It really comes down to control, right? That when it comes to masculine, like masculine men tend to be independent, right? They tend to do their own thing. They tend to be disagreeable. And when you're talking about control, it's hard to control a person that's an independent thinker like that. And you see that in society, right, where they push a lot of women into corporate areas, right? They put them into places of authority and places where they make decisions because they're much easier to control. And they also they just push to feminize men, right? Because if you can feminize men, then it's much easier to control these men. That's why it's so hard to. That's why is this push, this agenda to make sure masculinity is a bad thing. So how do they do it, right? How do they do it? It's almost like they try to rebrand what masculinity is. Okay, like this, if you're someone that shows discipline, stoicism, leadership qualities, right? They deem this as harmful, right? So if they can rebrand what masculinity is, anybody that shows these type of traits, we can just label them as dangerous. And that's the goal, right? They want to make sure that anyone that it wants to stop people from anyone that wants to present themselves as a masculine person. And you see that because you see that in schools, right? The boys are punished for being too aggressive, right? Or while the girls are encouraged to be dominant, right? And it's almost like they want to reverse the roles of a boy and a girl, right? Because boys are told to sit down, shut up, and be quiet, and girls are told are pushed to be assertive, right? Which is these aren't just qualities of boys and girls. And this is what they do. They want to flip that gender role, and they start them young. And you see that because men are shamed for being competitive, dominant, assertive, and you see that like any men that present these things, they want to shame that individual just so you can stop men from wanting to see these traits as quality traits as a man. So if you can shame them to do that, then you could stop men from wanting to be these things, right? And make them feel bad for wanting to show masculine traits. And you see that, and not only that, but you see men are praised for being soft, passive, submissive. Like these aren't masculine traits, but yet you see a lot of men, taking on these qualities because they've been shamed so much into wanting to be for being masculine. And you wonder why a lot of girls, when the girls in the dating scenes talk about how men are so passive and feminine, right? Like even though these girls, when they see these qualities, they talk bad about them, but yet when they're trying to date men, they say, "Oh man, why are men so passive? Why don't they take control? Why aren't they more assertive?" Because they've been conditioned not to be, and they've been shamed. They've been shamed into wanting to be a masculine person, so they say, all right, if I can't be that, then I guess I got to be this other person. Right? This is done on purpose. So because the more emasculated a man is, the more dependent he becomes to the system, and that's what they want, right? Because if a man isn't leading, then someone else is controlling, and this is what they want, right? This is done intentionally. Okay, so let's talk about some of the examples, right? Because I like to get into the example so you can see these how it's being done, right? Because if you talk about cultural warfare, right, you see how the media attacks men, right? They portray men as clueless, stupid, and dangerous, right? You see that all the time. I think they had a Gillette commercial a few years ago where they were talking about boys being boys, as if men have no idea how to control themselves, as if boys being boys is a dangerous thing. Right? That's just a natural thing. Guys being guys, boys being boys, girls being girls. It's just what we do. But the way they portrayed it made it seem as if it's something that we shouldn't, men and boys shouldn't, attain. Like, there's something wrong with you. Okay, and they shame you by saying you're mansplaining, toxic masculinity, which is these fake words. Like there's nothing toxic about masculinity, right? Just like femininity. Femininity is femininity. Masculinity is masculinity. There's toxic people, but to say toxic masculinity, these are the words that they like to coin to make sure that anyone that's masculine is toxic, and it's done intentionally. It's good marketing, right? And you see how they in social media how they silence people. They silence anyone that shows strength, that shows leadership, right? They tend to silence these people on social media. Okay, so and this is to make sure that they don't spread the whole. They don't want anybody to make sure that people are spreading this masculinity message that of course for being a masculine man is a good thing, but anybody that's pushing that is deemed dangerous, right? And then you look at like the political incentives, where you see a lot of systems where they're creating fatherless homes. You see a lot of children being raised without fathers, right? We know how detrimental this is for boys and girls, right? Boys without a father are going to be more violent, okay? They're going to be obviously do a lot of commit a lot of crime. And then you talk about the women, they're on antidepressants, they have all type of issues when it comes to mental issues, okay? And this is not something we want, right? You're educating young boys to be drugged up, because they're energetic. And obviously these are things that if you're a boy, you have a lot of energy and you want to release that energy. That's why it's good for boys to do that. But you're in school and they tell you, sit down, you're showing you're too aggressive, right? These are you doing this telling a boy that it's wrong to be a boy. And that's the point, to change that type of mindset. Okay? And you see in corporate as well, right? You see corporate where, they're pushing those diversity, inclusion, where they're putting more women into the male spaces, pushing out the men in the workforce. You're putting these women in there, right? Like if you ever worked in an office, like the ratio, not to say, I remember working in the office, man, look, it was great because the ratio was crazy, right? Especially if you're the only guy in there. You're one of very few men over there and you're working with a bunch of women. It could be to your advantage, but obviously you gotta be careful with that because, even now, like it's dangerous to even try to date someone where you work, right? Don't shit where you eat. That's the motto, right? But like you see that in corporate spaces, like it's done intentionally. Like women are pushed into these offices, and you see a lot of men being pushed out into the workforce doing other things, and that's done intentionally. And then you got the feminism roles where modern feminism is they talk about equality, but when in reality it's all about power. Right? They talk about equality with women when in reality it's all about maintaining power and creating power for themselves. And you see this dynamic every day where they're pushing these things where it makes men feel bad for being men, right? Like you got to apologize for being a man. Right? And you should never, like a man shouldn't have to apologize for being a man, like a woman shouldn't have to apologize for a woman. We're just two different people. Okay, but they're trying so hard to make sure that men understand that, hey, if you're gonna act like a man, it's a bad thing to be a man. And that's the thing. Like you got to make sure, right? Like you got to make sure that you're always putting yourself in a position that you don't lose yourself as a man, right? And you need to understand that there's nothing wrong with being a man. Right. So the things you need to do is that you need to make sure that you're hitting the gym, right? Making sure you're preparing yourself, both mentally, physically, right? Financially, making sure you're doing your best to improve yourself as a man. Be proud of the traits that you have as a man, whether it's showing strength, discipline, leadership, resilience. These are qualities of masculine men that we should never try to lose. These are very important things. Right, I know the system tries to manipulate this and make it seem like these are bad things, but obviously as men we understand that masculinity is about being a leader, right? Showing discipline, right, and continue to do things that builds the society, because we understand that masculinity is what builds society, right? But they're trying very hard to take that away so they can obviously destroy society, okay? And like we all understand, like masculinity isn't the problem, right? Masculinity isn't the problem. Lack of it is the problem. Lack of masculinity is the problem, and we see that on a daily basis. Just look at the black community where there's just no fathers in the homes, and we see where that's going with the black community. And any community where there's no father or there's no masculine person there, all right? So yeah, so we understand like this is an agenda. This is something that they're trying to do, and obviously as a man we have to keep pushing forward to make sure that we're doing what we need to do in order to maintain what we have. All right. So those are my thoughts. Interested to hear your thoughts. Make sure you leave a comment down below, hit the like button, share, and if you haven't done so, make sure to subscribe. So guys, take care. Have a good one. Later.